Hello, everybody. Hello.
Hi, now we can see you. Hi, it's really nice to have you here. Thank you very much for being with us even through Zoom. We were looking forward to have you in our next event in person. Geysha, the floor is yours for a short introduction. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Kalispera. Joining you from Washington, D.C. My name is Geysha Gonzales. I am the Senior Director for Programs and Strategy at the Center for European Policy Analysis, or CEPA. It is such a pleasure. I see that there are real people in person there. And so very exciting. And just looking at the program, you've had a fantastic lineup. And what a time to talk about truth, trust, and how we move forward as democracies in battling disinformation and false information that seeps into our everyday lives. I've been working on this issue for the last 7 years, which actually on this issue is not much in comparison to the whole world history of false information, rumors, and all of that. And so very excited to share some of my experiences here and how we can actually combat disinformation. It was great to see colleagues from the Global Engagement Center share some of their thoughts. I will be speaking more on the civil society side and generally how we see policy move in both Washington, D.C. and Europe to counter disinformation. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Geysha. Betty, the floor is yours.
Hello. I'm delighted to join this panel with you, dear Nikos, Professor Panagiotou, and Geysha Gonzales. And we're looking forward to share reflections about today's event and even to discuss more about Geysha Gonzales' work as well, because he has contributed so much on our thinking and policy making.
Thank you, Betty. Geysha, I would like actually to start from, let's say, the last discussion that we had with John. How do you think that tackling disinformation is only a technological issue, or we shall move beyond that approach?
No, I would say, look, rumors, false information, lies, all of this has existed as long as there have been humans and we have had cognitive thinking in this world. This is not, I mean, many people will say it over and over again. This is not new. What is new is, of course, the technologies that allow us to have more access to information, that allow us to get into what we call the rabbit holes of information, so you continue digging and falling into a well of disinformation. It has also changed in how malign actors can be more targeted in how they actually try to influence audiences, right? So, I mean, we talk a little bit about advertising, right? Like, let me sell you a Coca-Cola, right? A billboard, you just display it everywhere. Now malign actors have access to that kind of marketing and advertising and can do it with messages that are very reflective of our societies and the debates that exist. We saw it in 2016 in the US election, where, you have Russian actors work and seeping into that debate. And then you have it, even in the last election, where you have folks and malign actors that are using the technologies to advertise to the most susceptible audiences, targeted audiences that would believe what they see. And so this is what's new, but the challenge is not.
The next question is, how do you think that we can rebuild trust? Is it a key issue in order to respond not only to the challenge of disinformation, but in general to other challenges that our political institutions are facing?
Of course, I mean, I would say that there is nothing like a global crisis to open the floodgates in the cracks that already existed in societies that can expose so much of what has been happening. And so, COVID-19 has been challenging for so many reasons, but one is the breakdown of trust in the institutions. which is so critical for how audiences, absorb truth, actually function in their day-to-day lives. You see policymakers saying we need to do these measures in order to protect citizens, and then they are breaking their own lockdown restrictions. And so for an audience, for the public that is trusting the institutions to make the best decisions for them, to see this is a breakdown that then leads them to be susceptible to others that say the government is happy. This may be false, COVID, COVID is conspiracy. This doesn't exist. And so, I think in terms of responses, we really need to think about how do we have a government that is responsive to its citizens, does what it's best for its citizens, establish that trust that will then lead to us being able to adapt to the truth. I mean, and the last thing that I will say here is false information is sexy. The reason why we are attracted to disinformation as a general audience is because it is far more attractive than the truth. So those that are in the side of the truth have a lot more responsibility.
Thank you. Betty?
I would like to take a comment from one of the speakers here and to connect that comment to one of the concluding remarks from one of your recent CEPA reports. So we have this comment from Merav Harold from Israel, that the solution is the society taking responsibility for ourselves and our surrounds. And I was reading to your report that actually you are advocating for a whole of government and whole of the society approach, bringing together both civil society, media organizations, the government, the think tanks. And I would like to elaborate on that. And also bringing into the picture, the communities and the citizens themselves. So could you elaborate on that?
Of course, Betty, and thank you so much. I mean, I think throughout our entire work, we have always been advocating for a whole of society approach, understanding that the challenge of false information, like I just said, false information is delicious. I've often quoted it and said, disinformation and false information is a lot like junk food. It's like for me, it's a juicy burger with double cheese, and it's all those things that you're just like, this is it. And we know it's not good for us, but we still consume it, right? And so, we've also talked about how, false information is a lot like cigarettes and tobacco use. It is addictive, right? Even if the box has a label that tells you this could kill you, people still go out and buy cigarettes and consume them, right? So when we talk about we want to treat disinformation a lot like we treat a health issue. Something that is not good for our citizens, but we cannot restrict their ability to choose to have it, right? As democracies, we can't just take down all of the false information and make decisions and be the arbiters of truth for our citizens. So when we say whole of society approach, we're talking about you, the individual, those of you sitting in this audience, those of you that are tuning in online, actually, as you're searching for information, taking a pause, taking a beat, verifying and ensuring that it's a trusted source that you're viewing before you're sharing it, right? Does it cause you emotional triggers? Does it feel like this article is biased? So taking the pause before you're sharing the information is what you can do as citizens. Also investing in good journalism for those that are able, having subscriptions to your newspapers that you frequent, good journalism, independent journalism. I think about Coda's Story, Medusas of the world that are doing investigative journalism that is so critical for holding our institutions accountable and providing good information. Let's invest in them. Let's have subscriptions to them. That's what we can do as citizens in our day-to-day. When it comes to the social media platforms, of course, a lot more needs to do. needs to be done for regulation of the social media platforms. When you think about disinformation around COVID-19, one of the biggest platforms that we don't mention enough that has contributed to so much of this misinformation is YouTube. You know, I think many of you and I myself have started on YouTube in one video, and 8 hours later have passed, and I have just gone through the entire collection of all the recommended videos from YouTube. You know, so what are we doing about algorithmic transparency, understanding why are we being targeted with certain videos, certain recommendations? That is important and that is critical. So how the platforms react and what they do is going to be essential for this. And then governments, you know, really reestablishing the trust in governments, ensuring that there are policies in place that, yes, hold platforms accountable, but that also are meant for policymakers to hold themselves accountable for a lot of what happens. We can't have situations where you say we need a lockdown for the security of all of our citizens and then have the prime minister or the president or the governor or the mayor be out in a restaurant where there are people that can't actually adhere to this, right? So that is how you establish trust. So whole of society approach means that there is a place for everybody to act, and that, by the way, is not going to resolve the issue. There is no 100% solution to the challenge of false information. We are not going to solve it. Just like how we have not eliminated tobacco consumption in this world, there will still be people that fall for false information. There will still be people that this is their reality. And we just, as democracies, that's our reality. And so we can do the best that we can to ensure that there is a safe space for truth, that is the majority of it. We will not be able to eliminate it, but that's how we do it, with democratic values leading the way.
Thank you,
Thank you very much.
Betty, please go ahead.
Yes, I would like to continue, if I may. So I was really amazed by listening to one of our speakers saying that the journey to truth, from claim to fact, is actually a process. So I would like to focus a little bit more about how we navigate this journey. For example, we have discussed a lot about if media literacy and maybe media information literacy initiatives are good enough to have an impact in that seek of truth journey. This is one question, and how we can use technology to actually enhance and empower our civic capacity, meaning having a civic education, connecting media, information, technology, and the democratic civic spirit. So if you want to share your thoughts on that.
Of course. Thank you, Betty, for that. And I'm going to split it up a little bit here, I suppose. I think media literacy is an effective tool to address and prepare the young generation from being more immune to false information. But there is data that shows that those that fall for false information are already above 30 years old, out of school, and out in the world. To be able to provide media literacy and civic education for those citizens is a great operational challenge, and one that will be hard to achieve. But I say media literacy for school children is critical. We've seen Finland as a prime example of this. Very young students right away at media literacy. What I will find is a challenge in relying too heavily on media literacy is that often we have said, check your sources, have multiple sources for quoting and for, adding to your information. But now you see a lot of the debate, it's a lot of sources of false information. So when you see the debate, somebody will say, I don't know if many of you have experienced it, but even in my family, when we debate, and of course there's divisions over COVID and whether or not it's real, across many families, you have an aunt that will share with you 20 different links of articles of people that claim to be experts, and it's hard to tell them, like, you should check your sources, you should have more than one source for your information to prove that, because they will have 20, they will have 30. That is one of the challenges of the technology. We have so much access to information that points of view have become academic work. And so it's harder for the debate. So it's not going to fully address the issue. I say media literacy, yes, and civic education, yes, for younger generation. But that is why the society approach is critical, because most of the people that are making decisions around false information are and would not. Sorry. Like most people for false information will not class, will not think that we need civic education, and that is where government and day-to-day can be affected. Sorry, I hope you can hear me.
Yeah.
A little bit of
we can hear you perfectly fine. Since these 2 days we were discussing about the challenges in the 20s, since the main theme was Roaring 20s. If I would ask you to name, as our society struggled to come out of the COVID-19 and quarantine, etc., if I would ask you to name some of the key challenges that our societies face in this new era, which ones would be, Geysha? Thank you.
Of course. Thank you for that question. I want to say, history, there's an arch. And I feel like this is not, we call it the Roaring 20s, and I thought it was so interesting, right? Because we had the flu pandemic last century around the same time, where some of the same challenges we were faced. I mean, the influenza, the Spanish influenza, was raging across, and governments were hiding the truth for morale of the troops in World War I. So this is history, and the cycles will continue to present lessons for us to look back on. I don't think this is a unique challenge. I think, yes, technology being the new tool here is going to be a challenge, but as long as we remain committed to our democratic values and find democratic solutions to address this challenge, we will come out of this. And that again is very much reestablishing the trust of institutions with individuals. It is governments continuing to have a good response to these critical issues and sticking to them. It is us here who have, joined this discussion because you want to learn more about this challenge, having open and civilized discussions with our neighbors, with the people that we talk to in the day-to-day. I do think that it's been interesting to watch the challenge of disinformation evolve in the last 7 years, because when I started working on this, it was very much the Russia challenge, the Kremlin challenge, the RT is coming, the RT, false information, Vladimir Putin, disinformatia, and that is still there. But now we have other actors. We have China really increasingly making big waves. We have non-state actors. When you think about ISIS or even the Taliban and how they're utilizing social media platforms to propagate their narratives, to propagate and influence their constituencies. This challenge, the actors will continue to evolve. So we really need to remain steadfast in how we manage it as a society. And so, to my mind, again, it's the individuals. Take a pause, take a look at the information that you're sharing, and then lead with sympathy. I think particularly around vaccine disinformation, what we have seen is the debate become very emotional, with both sides of the debate just highly emotional, which leads to a lot of isolation. So it's leading with sympathy, having open conversations, reestablishing trust. I think, that is critical. Again, I think it's great that you have named the session and that so many of the conversations have revolved around facts, truth, trust. Trust is going to be critical for us to get. But again, I look at 1920s, 1820s. This isn't the first time we've gone through this type of crisis. We'll come out of this.
Thank you, Geysha. Betty?
I was wondering if we can focus a little bit more about the communities. We're talking a lot about how the institutions respond, from government to civil society or NGOs or educational systems or media. And at the same time, we have discussed a lot about how we also make a choice to be part of different communities. And as we are looking forward to be, I would say, to lead our own ways, to have ownership of our own decision making. We don't want to be wrong, as we listened some time before. We want to be on the right side and to control their own thinking and actions. I'm wondering how in this holistic approach we introduce the interplay, the interactions of communities, and most of them now are closed communities. They have their own dynamics, and they shape the conversation and our understandings about what is truth, what is, they want to influence everything. So what is your approach to the different communities that are overlapping, interacting, and they are shaping the public understanding of what is truth, what is influence, what is democracy, what is information, misinformation?
Right. And Betty, may I ask you, when you talk about communities, are you talking about, what is your definition of communities? Because there are a couple of ways that go here. Yes.
Okay. Usually when we are, everyone is talking about communities. We have changed our vocabulary. Instead of society, we're talking about connecting with communities. So communities can be communities of interest, communities of shared values, of shared activities, and usually those communities are at the same time on the digital space and in the physical space. So maybe the same people are members of different communities, but they empower each other on how they think and act and shape the public sphere, not just their own little community or bubble, if you want to call it like that.
Thank you, Betty. I just wanted to make sure that was clear before I launched into this, because as you know, the United States is one of the most diverse countries in the world. Exactly. And I will be sharing a little bit more personal piece of me. I am from Puerto Rico. I fall in the Latin American community in the United States, and I interact with many of the diverse communities across the country. And I think that whereas my work previously on disinformation was focused on malign actors, i.e. Russia, COVID-19 has presented a challenge in that now disinformation is an issue that cuts across all of our communities, and it's affecting us in various ways. And like when I talked about, I wouldn't usually in an expert conversation talk about the emotional aspects of false information and the passion that comes with really clinging into, this is my truth because my community has gone through these challenges and you don't trust the government. I think, when you look at the African American community, their truth is that, for so many years, governments used to experiment with their bodies in medical experiments. And so now the idea that the government is coming with a vaccine for COVID, it is very challenging and they're very susceptible to that. Same with the Latin American community, especially when it comes to issues of, immigration and how we're perceived. And I'm sure, and have studied up on the Asian American community and the narratives of the, Wuhan, virus, the Wuhan virus. And so when it comes to that, you can see that the challenge of disinformation is not just one of fact. There's no fact checking that can resolve your emotional and your historical background for why you believe your truth. So when we talk about the whole of society approach, it is having open conversations about how societies have evolved. It is about not being demeaning to somebody's view, right? So providing platforms for open debate, I think what you're doing here is fantastic and approve of that. But I think we need to be careful to not say that the challenge of false information and disinformation is one for uneducated people, that it is one for those that don't have media literacy capacities or don't know how to think for themselves. I think very much that when we're thinking about how do we approach these conversations, they have to be open, they have to acknowledge previous mistakes. I think that is also something that makes our democracies vibrant. The fact that we're able to talk about our historical misgivings, our historical failings in order to move forward. And there's an educational component. I think, the way that it has been approached, at least here in the United States, is finding those influencers in communities. It is about individuals really reaching out and reaching to the leaders of the various communities and having an open conversation about, how do we get out of this? And how do you relate? And what are your concerns? So I don't want to diverge, just spend too much time on this, but I think it's critical. I think, democracies, it's hard. It's hard work to be a democracy because we are open. All of our mistakes are open. All of our wounds are open. And so, I think when it comes to false information, that is where it thrives because we are open, because our mistakes are out there. So the solution here is just acknowledge, open conversation, and lead with sympathy. This is critical for establishing trust, which I believe will then lead to truth and the acceptance of the truth versus an individual's truth. And Betty, I hope that answers your question. It comes from a very personal side. It's really communities.
Thank you very much for this. I think it's something that I really wanted to touch upon, this idea that there are many truths and people and communities actually, they contrast their own, let's say, cultural or ethnic or various experiences and contrast them with each other. And the thing is how we find again, the common ground to open the space for authentic and sincere conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. I would like to actually close with these very nice words from both of you. And I would like to thank Olga that asked questions and posed some comments also on Slido. But I think that we should keep these very, to the point words that actually bring in the front the main discussion that we had during these 2 days. I would like to thank both Geysha, both Betty for being with us. Hopefully we will have you with us next time. And I would like to thank everyone involved in order to have Geysha with us. It was nice having you. Thank you very much.